So, Kirsten, last time we ended the episode talking about the fact that you need to be able to measure your promise of value, your employer brand.
Yep, and how well you're sticking to it.
Exactly. And we also decided that that wasn't a short topic and we actually need to spend a whole session talking about how you could possibly do that.
Yep.
So let's start, shall we, with the employer brand bit, first of all.
Yep, okay. So what would you start with measuring if you could? Because this is quite a difficult thing to measure, isn't it? There's not a kind of number.
Measurement. Exactly that. Yeah, there's not a metric that you can quantify easily.
Okay.
Or you might not think there is.
But there probably are proxies.
Indeed.
Yeah, okay.
Indeed. And these proxies actually will give you a better value because it covers a range of areas. So let's take one. Retention.
Yep.
Okay. So obviously a bit of staff turnover in your business is a healthy thing.
Mm-hmm.
You need fresh ideas coming in. People naturally grow and progress beyond the limits of your company or your offering and so on. And obviously, some industries have very different staff turnover figures than others.
Yeah.
So, entertainment, hospitality, you're going to have a very high staff turnover because it's a very transient type of industry to work in.
Or even IT, for example, where the way you learn more things is to move to a different company.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But if you were to, say, take a professional services firm, a legal firm, an accountancy firm, for example, you work a lot with accountancy firms, healthy turnover is probably somewhere between 7 and 10%.
Mm-hmm.
You will take out birth, deaths and marriages, as I call it. Now, if it's higher than that, the costs skyrocket exponentially. So if you think about all the costs involved in replacing someone in a firm, so you might have recruitment fees, for example. You might have training fees to bring people up. You might have your staff's time of actually hiring and recruiting people, and you have a loss of productivity whilst that person either isn't in post or someone's coming up to speed.
Okay.
Now, you also have disruption to your existing workforce.
Yes.
So if someone leaves who's maybe a well-liked or core member of the team, if they go elsewhere, that might start other people thinking about, oh, maybe I could move elsewhere as well. And you often see teams disintegrate. So a high-performing team, one person leaves. It's a bit like putting the plug out in the bath. All of a sudden, everybody else drift away as well.
Yeah, or even just people thinking, oh, I didn't realise we'd be able to leave. Exactly. Or the other thing is just people worrying about the workload that's left after that person's gone.
And that's the thing. Member staff leaves, there's going to be a transition period. Someone else is going to pick up that slack.
Yeah.
So that extra stress can then cause other people to then look elsewhere. So if you are retaining people without using things like golden handcuffs, be that money or stock options or anything like that, then you're doing well. Okay.
So actually that's a pretty good measure of how well you're living up to the employer brand they bought into when they joined.
Precisely. If people are staying with you, they're staying for a reason.
Good.
And particularly where we are at the moment with a pretty full economy, with full employment, people have opportunities. So if they're staying with you and it's not about the money, there's got to be a reason.
Good.
And a good reason.
Yeah.
And that then leads on to referral as well. So I did a whole little video podcast on this called Your Secret Recruitment Army, which is on the JCM Advisors YouTube channel. Do people working with you enjoy it so much that they refer their friends, their contacts to you? Okay. So if you have a team of 100 people in your business, you effectively have 100 recruiters.
Yep.
Or you should have.
And that's really true in franchising. Some of the best franchises don't recruit actively for new people because their franchisees get their families involved.
There you
go. They go, my brother will love one of these.
Yep.
I'll get him on board. Yeah, brilliant.
A classic one of those is cleaning companies.
Yeah.
And they take over areas and areas, and you find that the aunt's got one area, the sister's got another area, the daughter's got another area. Exactly that. So that referral...
It's a really good sign if you're doing
metric,
it well.
Yeah, if people are bringing people in. And then I've got what I call cost of sale. Mm-hmm. So this isn't cost of sale in the sense of what you're saying. It's go back a step. So are you having to pay people to recruit? Mm-hmm. So that links to the above. Are you having to pay recruitment agencies, for example? Are you having to pay for advertising? But also, are you having to overpay to attract people in? Are you paying market rate? Are you paying above market rate? Or are you paying below market rate?
Because sometimes what you're saying is you can get away with not get away with is the wrong word, but you can get away with below market rate
Completely.
if people really want to work with you.
I'm pretty sure that Google do not pay the best rates in the industry, in the IT industry.
No.
But people want to work for Google because for natural reasons. And so you're paying the rate that you need to pay to get the people in. If you're having to overpay, there you have your issue. And, I've long been a proponent of retaining people or paying people or increasing wages to retain and attract people. It's an arms race, which you can't ultimately win.
No.
Because there'll always be someone that will pay more.
Somebody with deeper pockets than you, so it's last man standing.
Exactly. Now we get into the ones that people might not think are so directly linked with your employer brand, but customer feedback.
Okay.
Customer feedback is a good measure of whether your employees are happy, for example.
How does that work? Give me an example.
So, if customers are happy with your employees, they will take the time to write in with positive praise.
Right, okay.
If people are generally satisfied or they're unhappy, so if they're unhappy, they'll write in, they'll complain. If they're generally satisfied, they won't do anything. If they feel that the employer's gone above and beyond, they will write in.
Yeah.
They'll make that extra effort. I've done it myself. I'm very happy to complain about poor service, but equally, I'll very happily write in about positive stuff as well. If you have happy employees, you generally have happier customers.
Yep, because they treat them well.
Exactly that. So it's a good measure. Are your employees happy? Because if your customers are happy, there's a fair chance that your employers are pretty happy as well, because that interaction is working in a positive manner.
Lovely. Yep.
And that links round to employee feedback as well. So how often do you seek employee feedback?
We talked about this in an earlier podcast, I think, didn't we? Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of it revolves around not being afraid to seek negative feedback. Mm-hmm. So negative feedback is good.
Yep.
Negative feedback for an employee means that the employee cares enough about your brand, enough about your business, to put their head above the parapet and complain.
In fact, yes. Yes. When I worked in a quite a well-known investment bank, I had a friend who worked in a different department from me, but he used to get sacked pretty regularly because he would tell the boss when he was doing things wrong. He would give him negative feedback, and the boss always sacked him immediately.
Yep.
And then about 2 or 3 days later reinstated him because he was quite often right. And I think while I was there, he was probably sacked about 4 or 5 times. And
it shows strong leadership, not the sacking, but the fact that you're willing to accept that feedback taken on board. That's strong leadership. That's strong management.
Yeah, he could have had feedback from more of us. We weren't all quite as brave as that.
Well, that's it. And it's beware the quiet employee.
Yeah.
No organisation is perfect.
Yeah.
So if people aren't giving you negatives or things that you can work on to improve the situation, then frankly, they're not engaged. No. They don't care enough to put themselves out there.
And actually that comes back to another thing we talked about before, which is appraisals and frequency. And you really need to be encouraging that feedback much more frequently than once a year.
Through both formal and informal channels. And that's the thing. You can have your formal appraisals, but you need those informal channels as well. Yeah. You need that approachability.
Yeah.
If you're a business owner and one of your colleagues is not willing to come up to your desk and say, can I highlight this to you? Then you've got a problem.
Yeah.
So you've got to overcome that approachability issue.
Particularly when, what we're talking about here is what you're hoping that people are feeding back on is, here is a better way to deliver on our promise.
That's it. They care enough to fix it. They care enough to help you fulfil your promise of value to your customers.
Absolutely.
And that's golden feedback. And it's really
what you
valuable.
Want. You want people doing that all the time.
Absolutely.
In fact, you want them not having to come to you to make the improvements if you can. But
absolutely.
Okay.
So that and the sort of the final point around that and around employees, if you like, is productivity.
Yep.
Now, there's loads of ways to measure productivity, etc. I'm very black and white about it in terms of happy people are more productive.
Yep.
It's just simply that.
But how can you tell if somebody was to? How would I know?
Because I think happy people that believe in what they're doing, they're more engaged.
Yep.
and they bring more of themselves to work. They go above and beyond to keep the promise of value.
Yeah.
So it's all those little micro things that they do. So sure, everybody works their hours. Some people work longer hours, all the rest of it. But are people bringing new ideas to the table? Are people bringing you solutions, not problems? They come up and say, look, this customer had this issue. I fixed it using X, Y, and Z. Rather than coming to you and say, this customer's got this issue.
Yeah.
And that is a really good teller for whether your employees are really engaged with your purpose. If they're coming to you with, we fixed this, as opposed to, this is a problem, you know you've got a great team who are really behind you and supporting the business you've got and the values that you have.
But is there a more tangible effect of that? I mean, are you going to end up making more money, putting it bluntly?
Well, I think if you then twist this whole thing to promise of value, then you can start seeing the economic metrics, if you like, of that.
Ah, okay. Yes, so from a promise of value point of view, which is how you're perceived by your prospects and clients as opposed to your employees, all of the things you mentioned are pretty similar, really, aren't they? You would measure some of the same things.
It should almost be a two-way mirror.
So we can start with a kind of the productivity thing, is that if you have a really clear promise of value and you keep it when somebody becomes a customer with you, they are going to be willing to pay more for that privilege.
So increasing
if I
profitability.
can't tell the difference between you know, one accountant and another accountant, they're doing the same thing, as far as I can tell, they're doing the same thing the same way, I'm going to go for the cheapest because I can't tell the difference.
Yep.
But if it's really clear that from a particular accountant I'm going to get a better service, I'm going to get more attention, more care, more help, more proactive help, I am very willing to pay more for that than I would otherwise. So actually, having a promise of value and keeping it is going to get you more money from customers, basically. So you should be more profitable per client. And some of the other things are very similar as well. So, you know, your cost of sale, cost of taking on an employee, same sort of thing. Are you having to pay to enroll clients with you? Are you having to advertise, hire a sales force? You know, are you having to do things that cost you money before you get a client, or do they just come to you spontaneously? And
a classic example of that, one of my businesses, Broadnet, they've gone from 0 to 2,000 clients without spending a penny on advertising.
Wow.
Because they've had referral. There's a local event space near me, which again, they've spent no money at all in advertising, a bit of time on social media. They've built this whole brand community who basically become their marketeers because customers invest in the brand. It's the whole Kickstarter thing that we've spoken about in the past. People want to be involved in brands they trust, like, respect, and feel that they're making a difference. And
I know I do it. If I find something that I really like, even if I don't buy it myself, I'm quite happy to go and tell all sorts of other people about it. So we know that works, and that saves money. And the other side of that is, you know, apart from actually paying out, the other way you can pay to take clients on is that you're underpricing to take them on. So you're discounting. And I really hate discounting. You should never need to do it.
No, and that's almost the opposite of having to overpay for talent for exactly the same reason, but sort of the mirror of that.
Yeah, exactly. And then similar to feedback from employees, you know, you want feedback from customers. And what kind of feedback are you getting? How often are you getting it? How do you acquire it? I mean, the very best kind of feedback is completely spontaneous and unasked for, you know. So I think you mentioned the other day when we were chatting about this, you know, the NHS, people will spontaneously tweet, you know, share on social media, tell their friends, oh, you know, I went through a terrible time with this illness, but the staff were lovely. I can't praise them highly enough. You know, if you've got to pay for recommendations and pay for referrals or testimonials, if you like, you're not doing something wrong, but it's kind of the best kinds are the ones that you don't pay for. You don't even ask
organic
for.
Reach, isn't it? It's
Organic, yeah.
Everything organic is good. We know that.
And again, as with employees, even negative feedback from customers is good, because if they're telling you something's wrong, it's because they want you to put it right, which means they care about you getting it right because they want to stay a customer.
Well, that's it. And there is a difference between a complaint and negative feedback.
Yeah,
isn't there? I think a complaint is
straightforward.
You have failed to reach your promise of value because it's broken, this doesn't work, etc. That's reasonably straightforward. But then you get what I call quite detailed complaints, where people say, "Look, that didn't work. I really like this bit of this, but I didn't like that bit of it."
Yeah.
Once people start putting that balanced argument in a bit of feedback, you know that they're engaged. You know they're not just complaining for complaining's sake, because they put positives and negatives, because, as you say, they're trying.
They may even suggest solutions.
Absolutely. And that's again, it's the golden ticket, isn't it?
Yeah. So the really important thing with all that kind of feedback, customer or employer, is is to do something with it.
Yes.
To show that you're listening and that you act on it. So
that's
excellent.
why I quite like in the employee context the "you said we did" type stuff.
Yeah,
which is a very basic tool, and a lot of companies do that now, and they'll put it on the staff notice board. I mean, it's very big in the public sector, but you said, bum bum bum, we did, bum bum bum.
And how powerful would that be for clients as well?
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, and then retention again. It was interesting actually that your healthy turnover is between 7 and 10%, because the same sort of ratio for customers is around 6%. You lose around 6% of your clients through death or moving, basically. But if you can retain customers, and that to an extent depends on what kind of business you are, because you may be offering a service that isn't
could
that
be a
kind
one-off,
of thing.
couldn't it?
Could be one-off, funeral directors, say. But I know, for example, that Dognose, the dog walking business I worked with, they knew, for example, that somebody who got their dogs walked with them would stay with them for the life of the dog, which was about 10, 15 years. When the dog passed away, they would have a little gap and then they'd get another dog and come back. So they knew that their customer lifetime value was huge. You're talking about a £15 dog walk. That translated into a lifetime value of around £40,000 a client, because by the time they stayed a long time, they also did the next thing, which is they referred.
Yes.
So she knew that every one of her clients referred to her on average 2 other people. So that also means you're doing something really right. And people come back with a different dog and say, "Yeah, I won't get my dog walked with anybody else now."
And out of all that, there's so much common language there. If we looked at the promise of value from your side and the promise of value from the employee side, it's basically the same topics.
Absolutely.
So it is measurable. You can absolutely measure things like customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction. And yes, you can use all sorts of advanced survey and psychometric tools and things like that. But even if you don't do that, even if you're just a small business,
you can measure referrals
very, very clearly.
You can measure retention.
So and if we think back to all the other podcasts that we've done in this series, what it comes down to is that your employer brand is your promise of value.
Yep.
Or is part of your promise of value, and your promise of value is part of your employer brand.
They're all the same thing. They're just being looked at from a different perspective.
Exactly.
And I think what might even be quite interesting, maybe this is for the next series, is to look at how does it relate to other people your business interacts with, like your suppliers. And
that is a whole topic. There's a huge piece of that, because if you look at it, again, your promise of value, end-to-end supply chain, and that's something that we should certainly...
That could be really quite interesting. But I think a nice way to sum it all up is a little statement very popular with networking groups is, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And you have to be consistent across everyone you deal with. You are your brand, or at least you should be. You should be. Good place to end. Thank you very much.